fought. I was extroverted. My brother was the introverted one. And I was a fighter. So I fought every inch of the way for what I wanted. And I fought and I fought. And so I was trouble. I think in those days you didn't rebel overtly. You just complain and complain and complain. Or you rebelled overtly as well if you wanted to. For example, suddenly at puberty they tell you that frocks are out and you have to wear, or this whole business of the half sari. The half sari in the south is what you wear as a bridge between this and I remember saying to my mother that I cannot go to college in Delhi University wearing a half sari, and it was just negotiation. It was exhausting. But when I came to Ahmedabad in the first year, there were two girls from Madurai, one from Madurai actually, and one from Chennai. The Madurai one came wearing a half sari. And I remember Sardar on campus who came rushing and saying, there's this girl there and she's forgotten half her sari. And so the half sari to me is a symbol of every kind of every kind of rebellion. So yeah, I was rebellious, I was talkative, I was outgoing. And I was not afraid. And even when it came to going to IIM, there was this hoo-ha in the house when the admission letter came. And my father said he didn't know this was happening because he had been posted to Hyderabad at that time. He went on deputation to ECIL and we were left behind because girls can't go to Miranda's hostel. You get spoiled, you learn to smoke and drink. I did learn to smoke, but sneakily. And he said, over my dead body, you will go. And he said that you will go. Then he said, you will go on condition that you get engaged to who I tell you to. And I was 18. And I remember telling him that I don't want aid with strings and you can do what you want. And he gave my mother hell, basically, saying that, it's your ambitions that you're living out. And so just to spite him, when the Calcutta admission letter came, it was 4,000 rupees, was a lot of money in those days. I said, you have to pay for this too. Because he had said to me very nastily, Ahmedabad needed 65%. And he said that your results haven't yet come and who knows, you might not make it. And Calcutta wanted only 40%. And so I said, for that statement, you pay. And he did pay. And then after that, he kept chasing me saying, aren't you going to write to them for a refund? And I said, no. So I was on the IIM Calcutta notice board for a month, apparently, where they put people who are absent until someone said to them that she's actually joined Ahmedabad. So that's the conservative, liberal sort of fight that happens to most women of my generation. It was Amarlal Kalro. In fact, all my friends to this day have very clear images of the interviews. If you ask my WhatsApp group, what was the WhatsApp groups are actually a great place. You just have to sort of ask them, what was your interview? Just yesterday I was talking to one, and so I had Amar Kalro and I had Mirza Sayedin. And Meenakshi Malia says she was at my interview, but I would have remembered, so maybe she's mistaken. And I know Amar Kalro asked me about engines and physics stuff, and I didn't know some of it, and he kind of helped me along to answer it, but he looked a bit disappointed. And there was Mirza Sayedin, who was in the OB area, who had a fairly normal conversation with me. So there were three of them, and I think maybe the third was Dr. Malia. So it was not a terrifying interview, but it was a demanding one. I mean, Kalro made you think, and he said, well, how about this? Something I can't remember, but it was physics. And I said, I don't know. And he said, but if you think about that, then does it click? And I said, oh, yeah, then it's this. And he said, how could you not kind of expression? So it was a warm interview. It was not an interview meant to trip me up. It was a comfortable interview. I did not remember feeling pressure. It was from all over India. We had, of course, the Stephanian Cool Gang. We had the IIT Cool Gang. We had a few people with work experience. We had guys from Jaipur. Of the women, one was from Madurai, who was a dancer. One was from Chennai, and she used to be in the cricket team in Chennai, and they were called Panagal Park 1 and 2 and Idli Sambar by the guys who came from this Sardar from the Agricultural University who had never seen a half sari before. So yeah, it was a very eclectic mix. There was another lady, woman in the batch who was from... she had a psychology degree from LSR, and a friend of mine who now does military history publishing, who had a Meerut University psycho degree, says that the both of them had shown up for the group discussion together. So yeah, so it was a huge mix. Oh my God. It was like terrifying. And that was the same year my brother went to IIMA, to the military academy. And my mother says that for the entire first year, every time the doorbell rang, she was fully prepared for one of us to be there with our bags saying, you know what, I can't take the pressure. And she said she pretty near couldn't take the pressure because it was double the pressure, because both of us were in environments where we couldn't cope. So it was a killer, and we used to joke that the faculty, the joke came the second year. First year we were too scared to even joke. But the fact that there's no ragging on this campus because the faculty rag you. And I remember till the end of the first year, we did not have the courage to change our seats. You sat where you were told to sit. Just yesterday, Santosh Desai had come and I attended his class with Jen. And we remember, he said he sat in this particular row and there were only two Desais. And I said I sat in a row, my maiden name was R.A.O. Rao. So there was Rao HRC, Rao JMM. We were a whole row of Raos, which was called One Hell of a Rao, which my classmates still remember. I was called Little Goldie Girl because like I was all of 18 and I don't have 3 sets of clothes and I'd never been away from home and I didn't understand, I suppose, appropriate behavior. At one level I said what I wanted, but it was really horrible because you come from physics, you don't know, but I think that is actually the greatness of the place. So you don't know a debit from a credit. No one in your life has ever used that word around you, and you're taught Manak in term 1, then you get an F. You've never got an F in your life, and then you're told to go to remedial class, and if you go to remedial class then you can't read the Jen Vora torture camp number of pages you're supposed to do. And then there are always, I mean, we now find a guy from the batch, we never let him forget it, is that he would come to the girls' dorm and he would help us with our Manak until we discovered that he was not a chartered accountant. He would learn in the boys' dorm and come to the girls' dorm. And then we had MSM, which I wrote, if you saw the obit I wrote for Dr. Moti, I talked about the horrible trinity of Moti Sahamalya. And then there was Madhavan, who was an FPM. He was a professor later. So the first year, he actually ran in his class, in his dorm room, maths lessons for all of us. So all of us, women plus a few men who didn't know any better, would land up there. Though I was okay with maths, but all the engineers failed basically. So MSM also they failed you, Manak also they failed you. I remember in marketing the first session, Vora and Company, one of my classmates who became a gold medal later, Hemant Shah, used the word break even, and I had never heard the word break even. So can you imagine the steepness of that learning curve? I mean, it was a nightmare, and there was a case called the case of the rat-eaten report, where it was Bala's favorite, and it was bits and pieces of a rat-eaten report, and you had to piece it together. And you had no hope in hell of how you did anything. So it was, it was only many years later that I realized what I'd learned, but I thought I'd learned nothing, and just the pressure to keep up was horrific. It was not overawing. I think in a sense we didn't, even though now I think that we should have known more about, I mean, we knew Louis Kahn, but it didn't seem like the architectural wonder it was. It was just this nice place with crazy big circles and, and it was a walking campus. And the Louis Kahn Plaza actually was the center of life, because at 11 at night, everybody would gather at the Louis Kahn Plaza to have tea. And that's when M and Vora would come the day before so if tomorrow was the exam for term 2, he would arrive with term 1 papers graded the night before and give it to you and say, for God's sake, see it before you go. Or Pradeep Khanwala had a course called Management of Change, where you had to change something on campus in a group. So one day when Meenakshi Malia arrived wearing trousers to the chai place, everybody said, that's a mock project. So it was the center of life. Okay, we had a PGP chairman, Bala, who was perpetually found in the women's dorm because we just loved him. And he would stand downstairs and he would shout up when it was chai time for me. He would call me Rema, because all Keralites do. He would say, Rema, Rema, Rema. So my batch to this day calls him Bela. So these are things that pretty much the at least large parts of the batch actually knew. And then the women complained and Bala got us curtains, and so the men felt that what the hell, why are you guys getting curtains and why are we not getting curtains? But the other thing was, to me, was the complete absence of gender consciousness. Like now I am shocked to find that there is an entry register to the girls' dorm. Okay, what used to be a good spot for us was the top floor actually when we joined had the second year women and many of us were on the mezzanine. And so it was interesting to see the guys who went up and the guys who came down and try to figure out where they went. I mean, we knew pretty soon. But it was quite an interesting sport. And the guys were all the time in the girls' dorm and vice versa. I remember my friend Frida and I going into someone's room and he wasn't there and we were waiting for him and it was cold. So we sort of went under the blanket and waited for him. And his uncle came, opened the door and said, "Oh my God, I'm sorry, I thought it was a boys' dorm." And we're like, this is the boys' dorm. What can we do for you? So the strangeness of it never occurred to us, I do know going into project rooms where it was largely men and, lying down and going to sleep because they were just fighting about something. And then somebody would wake me up and say, it's time you went back to your own room. So I think it was just the whole liberation from a gendered environment, which I think all of us felt. Then we met in the second year. He, towards the end of the first year, or the second year early, he was doing a market survey and he one day asked us, "How would you girls like to make money?" And we said, "Oh, absolutely yes." And then one day he said, "How's it going?" And I said, "We did 20 interviews." And he said, "It's interesting because the supermarket is closed today, so you guys are clearly fudging." So I was then elected to go and tell him that at least pay us for the ones we didn't fudge. And so every day I would show up there to plead my case, and then you didn't date in those days. I mean, you just hung around together, and then so Dr. Mote said, "Stupid idiot fell in love, otherwise he would have finished his PhD earlier." So that's what the faculty did. So all the women in my batch have got married to guys from my batch. All, bar one. And
7 out of 8.
Yeah. So it's very nice because we now know both sides and like one of them said, "Why do I want to marry you women? Do I want Harvard Business Review summarized at home?" And we would say, "Okay, we'll have to learn the price of vegetables because that's what we have to talk about your wife." So I met them at their first grandchild's. They were celebrating the birth of their first grandchild. And I said, "I certainly hope you had enough HBR summarized." So it's like that. We know, and that's part of the bonding as well. So we're a gang. We were just lucky. We were taught by this really imposing guy. So there was a lot of power distance, I will tell you, at one level. At another level, there were the Balas and the Shrikant Samranis, and you could go to their house and play Scrabble. Or one day we persuaded Bala to host a party for the birthday of 3 of us around that time, which he did. The faculty houses complaining that it was loud, noisy. Went on all night. He was a bachelor at that time. So it was possible to do that. But there was Rangarajan. And there was S.K. Bhattacharya, and SKB was imposing. If you got an A from SKB, you went to heaven and came back. There were C.K. Prahlad, and I often told him that if I knew you were going to get so famous, I may have attended a few more of your classes. There was Professor Vora. Oh my God! I mean, they called on you a lot in those days. I mean, Dr. Mote, of course, would come and dive at your feet and say, "You're my Mai Baap, tell me what to do." And if you hadn't read the case, it was a killer. Vora would call. He would start 3 classes. He started with Rama Miss. So I went up to him and I said, "I just want to let you know the alphabet begins with A, and there are other alphabets." So he said, "Oh, yes, very good, very good." I went the next day, supremely secure. And again, he looked and he started Rama Miss. So it was a lot of boot camp. But I think everybody taught you something. WAC was the most hated, the most horrific. And today people say that it is the thing that helped them the most. We hated the WAC readers. We thought they had no sense of grammar. Srinivas Rao would say. So it was a lot of bullying, actually. I mean, not now. If we try to teach now the way we taught then, I think this cohort, which has been, sort of coddled in the get through 9, get through 10, get through 12, your job is to study, wouldn't have made it, I think. So like Srinivas Rao would say that so far you have been in 3 feet of water, and now I'm going to take you into 6 feet of water because the height of the average Indian male is 5 feet 10 inches. And you would be terrified and you would say, "I have a stick of dynamite under your chair and the fuse is in my hands, and so I would like you to now contribute to this class," literally, quote unquote. So finally in placement, TS came saying women need not apply. I wouldn't have had the grades either. But there was a limited, in fact, I've written about this as well in BET or something, where you actually had a choice. I think placement was very gendered. And I'll send you that piece. It's about placement was very gendered. I mean, like, I know Kamini was asked that if you can't talk about sanitary napkins, how are you going to sell it? Which I thought was a bit excessive if you're joining J&J, because the guys were there. I've written about how I had an interview with this company, which I will name maybe the Forbes and Campbell, and it was give me you do crossword, is that your hobby? Give me a 4-letter word for intercourse. And I said talk. And it's just grace of God that it comes to you. But it was an offensive question, and I've written about it some time ago, and I said that in those days it did not, on the Me Too movement, then in those days it did not occur to me that that was not appropriate. Okay, so all of us ended up, and that year the banks didn't come, and the banks were big hirers, Citibank and all, and I remember the guys saying to us that where will you girls go, because none of the banks are coming. So the real men jobs were TS and, stuff like that. Oh my God, they were amazing. There was Mr. Pillai, who was the PGP office, who took care of us, made sure scheduling was ship-shape. The administrative staff was absolutely superb. If you had a light bulb that needed, and the housekeeping and everything, I mean, if you had a light bulb that needed to get changed, it would get done. If you had a clash on a course, it would get done. We had all our mail that came to us in different mailboxes, and they made sure you read the mail that came to you and, didn't just not do it. The placement office was superb. In fact, one of them is now, so you see them all over the place sometimes. This gentleman, K.K. Nair of Ahmedabad Management Association, he was, I think, placement office at that time. Then the IIM Ahmedabad guy is also this. So they really took care of you administration-wise. I mean, it was just, even the staff, the mess. I mean, my husband was quasi-communist, so I got a lot of good treatment from them. But everybody in the mess knew you by name. When you went back, they knew what you eat. They would say, "Abhi anda bhuji khate ho ki nahi?" The other day I met one guy who said to me, how fat you've become, and I said, how much older I am, and I said, what about you? But it's that kind of friendly stuff. There's some guys who've now upskilled and become car drivers, and they come and tell you, you remember you were there, the old people in the library. What I want to say about those days is that for one thing, they gave you equality. The minute you came in, there was no junior professor, senior professor, and I dearly value that. I teach with my teacher, Jen, for so many years, and I think I've been equal from day one, whether I was up to it or not. I also think that they mentored you a lot. So I remember going to Vora and saying that, we're supposed to go through the case and do problem definition and all that stuff. But the class would say, this is the problem, then the 4 P's are the answer. And I said, the discussion ends in 10 minutes, what do I do? And so Vora would sit you down and say, okay, let's talk about how you do it and what your own thing is. So they really trained you in it. I produced a lot of material from my own work, and they were very happy to run it. It would say draft not for case unit use because it didn't meet case unit criteria, but they gave you all that. So I think what I also like about this place is that if you could be teaching a course for 10 years, and if you haven't got it in time for the faculty committee to approve it, you don't get to teach it even if you're Abhinandan Jain and Bijapurkar and the course has good ratings. I think that keeps us all phenomenally honest. And I think right now I will tell you that I see the joy of having taught because everybody from the chairman of NABARD, as I said when I did Jayan's Festschrift, everybody from the chairman of NABARD to somebody else will call you and say, ma'am, you taught me, can you give me another 2 hours for this submission? And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I think you were taught, you were helped, and there's a lot of room to experiment. So this year we're doing a new course with Arvind Sahai, a French professor, as Sri Kumar, which is part neuro, part anthropology, part big data. I mean, where do you get to experiment like this in any other place? You don't, right? So it's absolutely phenomenal. I think one of the major issues was so I think we fought very hard for autonomy right from the days of Narayan Murthy when there was the fee hike and so on. One of the things I always say is the genius of Vikram Sarabhai, that 2-page MOU that was done between IIMA Society and the ministry actually saved us again and again and again. And that a 2-page MOU can bring you clarity to be used for future generations 50 years later is a source of continuing mind boggle for me. It just laid out in 2 pages what our rights are and what their rights are. So every time the ministry tried to pile on to us, we said this is our right. I also found that it's really bad to have industry on boards of these, and I've written extensively about it, because if Kapil Sibal is also IT minister or telecom minister and also MHRD minister, and Sunil Mittal is on your board, in a month of Sundays, there is no obligation to dissent, there is no ownership of the institution. I think these have become badge jobs that you have. So one of the big things Murthy did was to get alumni on the board. I think that was significantly different. I think that was really quite terrific. We saw and I think even though boards have more autonomy than they think they do, they're not willing to use it. So I think that is a big issue. So I think the job of the board was basically to protect institutional autonomy. It's only now that you have a different role you have to play, because you already have autonomy. You have to take it, run with it, and decide what you do. But otherwise, there it was, if MHRD told Samir Barua what to do off the board, we should tell MHRD at the board, which I did many times, that your job is to participate through the board. If you give off-board orders to our director, we will tell our director to ignore it. So you need a board with balls, basically. When we've had good chairmen and boards, my first stint had Murthy, Mashelkar, that whole lot. So I think we got some solid stuff done where Murthy could just say, I don't think he would tell MHRD, I don't think he would do it. When MHRD is good, it's great. We had Hasmukh Adya, who later went on to become Expenditure Secretary, Government of Gujarat. So I think there was a lot of jugaad. The 3 names we gave for chairman, they didn't pick any of the 3. So I think the board has, and now more, but even then it had enough teeth to protect itself, to govern properly. But if you make the board, for example, a bunch of businessmen in Gujarat with an overpowering Gujarat chief minister, I mean, you're never going to get any kind of institutional protections. I think it's what Ravi Mathai said, that we teach you, and I wonder whether we will carry it through, but I don't know. But we teach you how to learn so you can learn the rest of your life. So I'd say we teach you how to learn and we teach you how to think. So my generation, and I say this very often, should have been wiped out in 1991. The world changed. We'd never learned any economics. I remember telling Rangarajan that nothing you taught me ever prepares me for the economics I need to know now, right? But guys like K.V. Kamal should have just curled up and died, because nothing prepared you for the shift in the country in 91. But yet, my generation of IIM went on to thrive. So clearly, there is something about learnability, adaptability. It's also, in those days, the specialization bothers me, because in those days, if you went for a marketing interview in the morning and a finance interview in the afternoon, and it was the same interview panel, then you recovered and said a good manager should do both. So I think just that, when the startups became cool, we still have the lion's share of the startuppers, right? So they made the transition. If social entrepreneurship is where it is, you will still find that. So clearly it is allowing people to adapt to whatever is the need of the hour and the situation. When going global became important, I think we also have a very good contingent of people who went out as middle managers and made their mark overseas. So navigating this turbulent world, this VUCA world that they talk about, there is something in this place that enables you to do it. And it teaches you how to learn, and it teaches you how to stay on top, and you're very, very learnable. And I see it every generation. We just hired a woman CEO from an alumna for NPCI. She comes from Hong Kong HSBC background, but has adapted very well to. We've said this is a public utility, it's a nationally important thing, all this UPI, RuPay stuff, and we see adaptability. So I think that is really the hallmark. I mean, whether it's a Rashmi Bansal who's adapted in a different world, or, an MP from Sikkim, or a bureaucrat, I think it is what we say, that the conceptual clarity and the learnability is more important than the context familiarity, and it will take you through.